Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome to the last in our series of Considering Dairy, Get the Basics Right. Today it's just Patrick and myself, and we're going to go through, Patrick predominantly is going to go through the layout in terms of farmyard infrastructure. So as you'll have seen from the couple of webinars that we've done so far, there's a big emphasis on getting things right out in the fields in terms of reseeding, soil fertility, the layout of the paddocks, the roadways, servicing them, etc. But obviously a big part of any new dairy setup is going to be the location of the milking parlour, its proximity to the housing, because obviously we're going to have to be tied into the housing for some spell during the course of every year. So Patrick is going to talk about that. Then ultimately, obviously, all this comes down to brass tacks and how does it all add up. So there can be big investment into facilities, obviously, in the yard. But if it doesn't all add up at the end of the day, there's no point in doing it. And I suppose the other thing is trying to put that budget, this capital budget that Patrick refers to it as, but trying to put a cost on what's it all going to cost. And I suppose what you have to be careful of, and you'll pick it up as you go along, Patrick, is kind of a drift when you're building, that you kind of add on this and add on that. And next thing you've gone way overspend and you have to try and recoup that. So I suppose we'll let you make a start there, so Patrick, in terms of sharing your slides, and we'll take any questions as you're coming along.
Thanks, Stuart. Okay, so Stuart said we're just going to go through farmyard stuff and designs, and with a few samples similar to last week, and then try to put it all together as normal. If any questions are that, send them on the text box there, and Stuart will see them, and we'll try to answer them as best we can. So I suppose, look, the parlor location is very important because if you think about any dairy farm, the focal point of all the activity is the milking part, and everything will build off that. And often when I'm at farm walks and things like that, I always say that it's a very important thing, because it'll normally last, the site of the parlor will normally last around 30 years. Because if you look at any dairy farms where the parlor goes, it tends to stay in that location, because that's why the power will end up going there, the milk curry will end up going there, the cubicles start get built off to one side, and it can be very hard to relocate that because you have so many facilities built around it. And from what happens in a lot, and we'll show it later in the presentation, what we get with a lot of existing farmers is because it would have grown over time. Maybe a lot of these, a lot of these dairy farms yourself, that maybe if we go back 30, 40 years ago, to maybe milking 30 or 40 cows, and some of them are up to 150 to 100. And the location of the parlour very rarely change, but think that the farm built around it, and they can end up in scenarios where it can be very hard to expand the parlour, or it's very poor from a cow flow point of view. And again, no different than the stock. You have a huge opportunity from a new entrant point of view to try and get this right and future-proof the business. So if you look at this, like, there's a lot of things to consider. One is access for the milk lorry, the roadway network, where tractors are crossing, number of turns into collecting yard, and how cows get in and out of it, and how the cows come from the cubicle shed to the collecting yard. The first three, I would say, are the main ones. And so on last week's one, we're talking about 3 turns and in. On this one, I'd say we have to focus mainly on these first 3 things. What you have in them is the 3 main movements in your farm. So milk lorry will come in. They want clean access in and out. So they come in, don't interfere with anyone. They're clean in, suck, and out again without worrying about anyone else. And that's to be fair to everyone. It's not fair to to you if the milk lorry comes in covered in dirt, maybe bringing something in with it. So everyone has to be fair. And also the milk lorry likes to keep his feet clean. So we want clean access in and out. Then we have the cow movement, which is coming from the roadway network. So that's where the cows, for most of the milking, are coming in and out. So we want to have them cows coming in, as we said last week, free into the parlour, minimum amount of turns, minimum amount of fuss. And the last one then is the tractors. So where the tractors are moving across the yard. So they are the 3 main movements in your farmyard. And they ideally don't cross over each other. So they can all work independent of each other. So for example, the milk lorry could be coming in, someone could be feeding out silage, and someone could be bringing in the cows. They can all be working, and none of them are crossing over. And we'll show that for examples when we get into it, and how it works in practice when we get into the examples of it. And then the other ones start coming in, obviously, the minimise number of turns, how the cows get in and out, and then where they are in relation to your buildings on your farm. I will say in any farm, like what we have to look at is expansion, and again we'll show it later. The site has to be able to be grown off. So I think if you're planning on milking 50 cows, you should definitely be planning the farmyard for 100, 150 cows. It may never happen, but have the facility to be able to expand your business and expand your parlor. So it needs to be going in expansion lines. And again, we'll demonstrate that at a later stage, Stuart. So look, within the parlor, and I'm not going to go through individual. There's a lot of stuff within the parlor, and the sales reps will come out to you. Do you want to adjust the zigzag bars, pit size? Are you going to go for 2'2", 2'3", 3-foot centers? Can you go rapid exit? Number of units? Like there's a huge amount of questions that get asked, and sometimes I feel that we get lost in this. So it's all about the salesman comes out, and we can have air gates, and we can have back flush, and we can have this, and we have that, the other. If the cows don't get in and out of the parlor fastly and efficiently, then it's irrelevant to what the number of units we have. So what I would say, it's a lot of people maybe with 20 unit parlor, and after the first row or two goes in are milked, they have to get out of the parlor to get the cows into the parlor, and that's a huge waste of resources. So you have to spend a huge amount of money putting that parlor in place, and yet you're out with a stick baiting your cows into the parlor. And also on the exit, if the cows don't exit the parlor at a quick pace, that slows down your milking. So getting the parlor location right and the design of it right is critically important. The number of units, the size of the parlor, the tech that you get, they're additional at the end. Now the one thing, and Stuart sort of said it there at the start, is we have to stick to a budget. In you look at a parlor, if you get the real top of the range parlor with everything on it, you could spend between 8,000 and 10,000 units just on the parlor. Or you can buy a parlor with very little gadgets on it for 2,000 or 2,500 units. Now the cost or the value of the milk you're going to get into your parlor or into your bulk tank is the same regardless of the type of parlor you milk. Now, I'm not saying that all the extras on the parlor are not nice. Of course they're nice. They make it nicer and easier to milk. But we have to work towards that budget. And one area where some people will struggle then is they overspend on the units within the parlor, or the number of units and the spec of that parlor, and then they run out of money for all the other things that we've mentioned before. And maybe they don't get the right type of stock, don't have the road network in. So be very careful with the parlor and stick to your budget. It's very easy, as in the Peter Ham example, to extend that parlor at a later stage when the cash flows allow. So the parlor is able to be fixed and moved on over time. Get going, get milk in the tank. So don't lose your nut on the parlor.
Well, Patrick, I suppose the key thing there, you've said it already, is that if you put the parlor in a spot where you can't expand it, you're scuppered if you do that, like.
Yeah, so it's critical, Stuart. Like so, and again, I think it'll work better when we get onto the picture of Stuart making show it. But to be able to have scope to move that parlor and expand it is very important on the job. Look, I've seen parlors where I've seen a 10, 12 unit parlor be bought for 20,000, and you could have the same one for 50,000. Look, and if you can afford it, you can afford it. It's not here that Stuart and I are trying to ruin Christmas here and that. If your budgets allow, and you have, for whatever reason, you have the scope and you want to put that extra little bit of a call it comfort or extra bit of gadgets into your parlor, that's fine. But if your budget is tight, which generally speaking, from all the people that we spoke in the past few weeks, it tends to be a little bit tight. Then you have to cut your cloth to measure. Like it has to work. For the business plan is the critical thing, that the cash, that you protect your business, and then as you can afford it, maybe you add to it over time. But the key thing is, which is very hard to change, I think, what you're coming to there, Stuart, is the parlor's put in the wrong place and turned the wrong way, and it can't, regardless of the spec that's in it, it's not future proof. I suppose what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and it becomes a big expense again then to try and do something with it the next time. So you're actually talking about greenfield site scenario, maybe, if you do want to upgrade it or whatever. Yeah, like.
Exactly. So just a quick bit then on the size of the bulk tank. Look, obviously you'll have to have a bulk tank. Ideally, you'll have between 2 to 3 days storage. If you are sizing it, I'd say go to 3 days storage. You look again. You can make sure to have a person with a good backup service. If the bulk tank goes down, you want someone to be able to fix it fairly quick. You can insure it. Some of them have text management services which tell you the liters and whatever else in the tank. I'm not a big believer in that. The co-op man leaves you a docket. I wouldn't be paying more for it, but that's my opinion. Generally speaking, a new bulk tank will anywhere, depend on the size, will be anywhere between €2 a litre to €2.50 a litre. So a 10,000 litre new bulk tank will be in around €25,000 before the grant, and that's ex-VAT. So they're quite an expensive thing. And for a lot of you, if you're getting the grant in the parlour and don't have a lot of scope left over, I would say there's great value in a second-hand bulk tank. You can get them from anywhere between €1 to €1.50 a litre, particularly the size of a 6,000 or 7,000 litre tank. You should be able to get them maybe in around €1.30 a litre, because tends to be the size that are coming out now, and they'll be replaced by bigger ones. They'll get you going, get milk in the tank, they'll be 100%. And they'll have a trade-in value in a couple of years if you size the tank up. So it's very easy to get into bulk tank. But if you are sizing for the bigger ones, it can add a huge part of your capital budget can go out by putting in a new tank if you don't have the grant on it. And it says here, like ideally, you'd size the tank right for the right size. So you can see the way you do the calculation. There's a number of cows by the litres. By the number of days, and then add an extra 10%. Now, I would normally use 28 litres there rather than 23 on this one, so it'll be 100 by 28 by 3, and then multiply that by 1.1. It'll give you the size of the tank that you require. Again, for a lot of you, you'll be starting at a lower volume, so you may be able to get away with that second-hand tank for a year, 2, 3, whatever, and then maybe at a later stage look to build on it. There's massive value there on second-hand tanks. And look, if you go on Dundee, or what some people have done is that within the parlour, they'll buy the parlour, they'll commit to buying the tank, and get a second-hand tank thrown in basic for a year or two while to get going and get their numbers up on the job. So there's numbers and ways. I think there's a lot of flexibility around the bulk tank when you're starting up on the job. The collecting yard, and again, look, there's a YouTube clip there if anyone wants to click on it. I think the key thing with the collecting yard, one is there's room for expansion, as Stuart's already said. It's in line with the parlour. So again, we'll show you that an example later on. The other thing is the size of it, and I suppose this is a lot of people where people go wrong, is what you're looking at from the size of a holding yard. You need about 1.5 metre squared per cow in the holding yard. And you design your holding yard with no cows in the parlour. So if you've a 16 in a parlour and you're milking 100 cows, the holding yard should be 150 metres squared. So when you go and start, the first thing you do is open the gate and let the cows in rather than have the cows in the parlour waiting for you. So you don't use the capacity in the parlour itself. And it's that 1.5 metres squared per cow. That's what we're looking at. It's the same, obviously, measurement if you go rectangular or circular. We can go to discuss that a little bit later on. My own preference is towards a rectangular yard. I find it easier to expand. Some people prefer the circular from a cow flow point of view, but my own is rectangular and tends to fit back better when we start attaching cubicle sheds and things like that to it. Look, in some places you're getting backing gates and scrapers. Again, to start off, I think you get out the hand squidgy for €20 and rock and roll there for a while. And then with the dairy wash tank, look, dairy wash tank is separated from the slurry storage. So if you have a tank that the cows are eating on, or the scrapers are pushed into from the cubicle shed that has then designated slurry, dairy washings is coming directly off the parlour or just on the holding yard itself. You need 15 days storage on that, and it can be spread through the winter, assuming that there's no slurry getting into it. But for the requirement of the department, you need 15 days storage on that.
I suppose, Patrick, just before you move on there, the people shouldn't underestimate the volume of water that they'll be creating, because it's probably something that they won't be used to if they're coming from a dry stock conversion.
Yeah, it's a big change, and I suppose particularly when you go into the bigger parlours, like so, some of the 20 units or that will have a 3 or 3.5 inch milk line, so it takes a huge amount of water to flush it. There's extra units, so you're washing them as well. There's a lot of wash down, just there's a lot more concrete the bigger the thing gets as well. So there's a huge step up of water. One is the parlour, and number 2 is actually the volume of water that the cows will drink on a dry day as well. Like, so there's a huge volume of water on it. Like we'd be 50 litres per cow per day if you're washing the yard down, is what the old rule of thumb is. It's 49 litres. that's based off an 8 unit milking parlour. When you get into the bigger ones, they'll flush that out a lot quicker because there's a lot more washing going on.
Yeah.
Particularly now with we're not allowed to use chlorine, and there's a lot more hot washing, so there's a huge amount of washing generated. And if it is going into the slurry storage, so you have it for handiness, but it's going into the slurry tank, it will put pressure on. That has to be, and you're milking through or milking into December, that will have to be accounted into your slurry calculations for nitrates. So it's very important to bear that in mind. And again, we'll show this again in a second now, but just eggs and drafting. And I'm just going to highlight the point on this is a lot of people worry about getting the cows in. I find, and well, when I was milking, and Stuart might comment on it as well now, but a cow that doesn't leave the parlour will wreck your head. So if you're there and you're milking and you're in a panic, because usually everyone's in a panic, and one cow stops on the exit because it's a narrow exit. So traditionally on the old parlours would be a 6-foot exit, or what you normally get is the builders that say you don't need that wide of a one, and it's 6 foot. So one cow will block it up. You're trying to empty a row of 10 or 12 cows. One cow stops, the rest of them are backed up. How long is it before you lose your temper there, Stuart?
I wouldn't lose my temper now, Patrick.
Can't lie on these things. This is up in front. I'd say about 2 minutes. I'd say for you, Stuart.
Yeah, but it is frustrating because sure you're looking to let in the next row of cows, and that it just causes it's like a traffic jam basically is what occurs, and that's the long and short of it. So the lights are green, but the car at the front is looking at their phone or something.
Learner driver,
and now the light's gone red again. Ah, Jesus.
Yeah. So what we want is a good space to the front of the parlour to exit them. And again, we'll show it as we go on through the presentation. So we have to think about cows in, cows out. So again, if you're going to a very small site, it's pokey, only a 5 foot the front, the cows will get out. They will get out, but it'll cause problems. You're also making cows turn tightly. So if you think of a cow and she's coming off the inside row and she's turned through a gate and turned hard on herself, it's hard on her hoof, whereas you give her more space, she'll meander out. So it's the same idea as what you'd get from the roadways on the way in. So if you give them a good space to move, they'll take it. If you narrow it up, they'll move slower through it. So it's the same idea from a holding yard and a drafting. The other thing I would say within the drafting is, well, I don't expect a lot of you to have maybe to invest in it day one. I think you should leave the space for the drafting unit thereafter. It's very easy to back concrete into space if you have it, but having a place to be able to pull your cows for AI, or for maybe you want, if the hoof person is coming in, leaving space for a footbath to come in, it's very important. And if I'm designing a parlour, what we'd normally say a normal 2'6" centre parlour is about 18 foot wide. I just say 20 for handiness, and I would be leaving to one side 30 foot for the draft option, and that's leaving enough space thereafter to be able to put in an automatic drafting crate if you want. So you're talking about the width of from the drafting unit across to the parlour of 50 foot, so it takes space. So if you're going into an old shed or something like that, to say if you Bob, you're using the old roof and it's 30 foot wide, 20 foot of that's going to be taken up by the parlour. So now you only have 10 foot for a draft, which is basically only enough room to get the cows down in their own right. So there's not much space for you to draft them cows. If you want to put in a crush or anything like that, so just think about them things. And as herds grow, like when you're at 50 or 60 cows, you're not drafting too many out on a day, so it's very handy. But as herds grow, it becomes an issue, and you need that space to be able to create the drafting. So I suppose the key, if you're looking at all these things from the parlour and everything around cows, if you're talking about good design and cow flow, it's space and letting the cows have space to express themselves and move at their own pace through the system on it. I do think with the auto drafting gates that they're about, look, they're anywhere from 8 to 15,000. They're a great piece of kit, but I do think it's something that can be added on. They're just a bolt down job. They can be added on later on in your career in dairying. Again, if the budget allows, fair enough. But if it's a thing that you're tight in other areas, I wouldn't be investing that day one. A gate on a rope with a weight on it will do the job until you get going on the system. So look, this is just a small bit in footbaths. I think it's one area it's overlooked a lot. And there's a lot. I've seen a lot of yards. You see the black plastic corrugated footbaths. It's for about 50 or 60 cows, and the cows sort of dance through it. They don't necessarily put their foot in, but a footbath's quite a simple thing, and I think it should be put in place. And the key thing with a footbath is the floor level of the footbath is the same level as the cow is standing on. So a lot of people sink them and do things like that, and the cows find it very hard to go through that because they can't see the bottom of it. So you actually have it above the ground. So, and you just have to form it a bit of concrete or a few blocks. You don't want to. There's some people you'll see that they're putting in a pre footbath and a post footbath. So they have water in the first footbath to wash the feet, and the second footbath then to have the solution. And in reality, what happens there is once the cow gets all her feet wet, she'll tend to lift the tail. So by the time she's getting into the one with the solution, she tends to put all the dung into it, and it gets dirty very fast. So the key is to have it about 3 meters long, so they can get their 4 feet into it. That there's no sharp edges. It's not, or sorry, it's above the ground. And the main thing is to make, if you need a lot of cows in it, you can make it wider, not longer. So making the footpath wider to allow for the capacity for the solution in it. So I think the key problem for a lot of people, that's the key problem with the plastic one, is when you look at, you put the solution in, you mix it up, and after a number of rows through it, the solution is gone because there's too much dirt in it. So you need a certain amount of solution for a number of cows. So it's easier to make them wider than long. A lot of people start making them longer, and then they end up with more dung in them because the cows are dunging in them. So look, and again, there's a YouTube clip there on it if anyone wants to click on it. They're very straightforward and simple. If you don't put them in on day one, that's fine. But again, it's about leaving the space for them. Is that okay, Stuart?
Yeah, I think the other thing, Patrick, is going back to what you said at the very start, that ability to leave, encourage the movement of the cows to get out of the milking facility is important for pushing them through a footbath as well.
Yeah.
If they're inclined to hang around, an obstacle like a footbath is just going to create a complete logjam altogether.
Yep. So it tends to be further away from the parlor than right at the door or anything like that. And that was the mistake with a lot of people back in the day when feed problems started becoming an issue, and they went off and bought the black plastic one and they threw it at the exit of the door, the 5-foot doorway. So then you had the 5-foot doorway, the cows didn't want to go through anyway. And there was this thing introduced which didn't have a smooth bottom. It's all corrugated. That was hard to walk through and sore on their feet. And then there was a real logjam, and Stuart's patience was down to a minute at that stage, I'd say now. So on the job. So look, what we were saying is this is an example of it, I suppose, and it's easier to talk through on these things. I'll get my pen out. I love my pen now. On it. So look, this is an example of a whole yard, and one with the other, it's as simple as this. And you can see it's about leaving the space. So the cows has a dairy wash tank at the back. 100%. The collecting yard, you can see the collecting yard is tapered, so it's going left and right. So that's to allow no blind corners. So if you have a real wide one, so if you, for example, if the holding yard came off the way down here and it's a real wide one, this is a sort of a blind corner here, and they're not as inclined to get into the parlor. So it's what I would normally do. It's 6 meter wide for the parlor. I tend to go 10 meter wide holding yard. So there'll be 10 meters here, that way, and down to that way. So it's 30 foot wide, and you can see this one here is 15 meters long. So that whole yard there is set up for 100 cow herd on it. So it's only brought out by 2 meters either side. If you see then they're into the whole yard there, into it, and you notice at the front here there's a wide gap at the front, and you can see that there, the cows have a wide turn on it to get back around. And you'll notice then the drafter is down here, and this is some of the points we're trying to make. The drafter is down here, so the cows can exit. There's room. If one cow stops, another cow can filter around her. The first main stop that they get is the drafter. That's an automatic drafter in this scenario. So if one cow stops here, there's plenty of room here for the full row to nearly empty out before she blocks up the whole thing. Now, a row of cows is about 10 minutes, give or take, 10 or 11 minutes a row. So no cow tends to stand for 10 or 11 minutes. She'll stand for 2 or 3 minutes. But again, when you're trying to empty the parlor and get through your milking process, that's very annoying. It feels like a lifetime, but they'll move on. So all you have to do is leave enough room at the front here that you can dump a row out. That gives that row 10 minutes to get out of your way, go back to grass or back to the shed or wherever it is. And so you can milk the next row and keep going. And then the process continues on through the system. So, and you'll also notice there, you can see they have a crush against the wall there, they have a herringbone crush, and there's space left here. So if you were looking at it then, like if you were in a 100 cow herd on a good day, you could be drafting 10 to 12 cows for AI. You have to have somewhere for them as well. So then you need space in that. So that's the extra space there that they have in that system there. So it's just it's very nice layout, and it's all drafted through, and the milk lorry to the side. So it's very straightforward, simple. And some people, and you'll see it on the Teagasc website, there's a virtual tour done by Francis Quigley of a Farm and Leash, and they have this done where the dairy is to one side. It's very good, but you can create more natural light. And I might just want to bring it in here before I forget it. If you go back to some of the older parlours with the lofts and things like that, like they're like a morgue. Like you can't even see the front wall. Like the cows won't go into them. So what we want is good natural light. And what some people have done in this scenario here is they put extra light windows in it,
Yeah.
or they open it up to allow the cows to access into it, to create a lot of light there, so the cows can see right through the parlour with a lot of bright, and they'll move through it a lot better. And the same within the parlour, plenty of skylights, get light into the building. It makes it a nicer environment for the worker, but also means the cows will move through it at a lot better pace. You want to say something there, Stuart?
Yeah, I just had a case that I'd say you were actually on the farm with me a couple of years ago as well, Patrick, where the guy was the first two, he couldn't get the first two units loaded basically without going down into the pit and hunting up the cows because of exactly what you said there, that darkness inside it.
Yeah.
So it's not to be underestimated. Like, they like to see where they're going, and it's a bit like the footbath as well. They like to see where they're putting their feet and so forth. So
yeah, so if I was putting a footbath, the footbath would be after the draft, or be somewhere here like that on the system, so that the cows would be moving through the system and not blocking them up on the system. And look, I think that's as simple as the design will get, and it's very straightforward. If you're working off something like that, you won't be too far off. I suppose is the point on that.
yeah, the other thing, just before I move on there, I suppose, is that drafting, not to bear in mind that you want to draft them in the direction that the cows are moving, so that they keep moving away from the drafter as well.
Yeah, so you can see
so that's ideal there.
The draft pen is back here, so that these cows will tend to go that way. So these cows will continually follow out, is what you're saying. Yeah, 100%. So a few examples then, and we'll try to do it best you can. So Stuart and I were going through this beforehand, and the best cases are the ones that are wrong, and a lot of dairy farms, because again it comes to the original point that the farm was put in, the parlour was put in the wrong place on it. In this scenario here, this is the parlour here. Jesus, my hands are getting worse as we go, and the whole yard is there. I'll just change my pen colour now for okay, so you can see the cows who were coming in from the roadway here, that cross across here, up into here and up into there. Then that the exit there's no real, and the exit back out through there. So you can see it's creating a lot of turns, a lot of twisting, very narrow on it, and the majority of the grass is straight down the back here. The milk lorry had to come in, and he had to come into this is the house here, come into the existing yard, drive biting up to the back door, reverse up and turn again. So there was a lot of traffic in here. One is in the house, the cows are very close in, and it's very narrow, and it's very hard to expand that parlour or back into the garden, which I was told was not allowed, and it was also very hard to expand the cubicle shed within the system. So when we looked at it then, and the one thing I would say, and I think it's important, I'm going to contradict myself, I suppose, now, is because we're at the whole last 3 series of webinars telling you not put your money in the right place, put your money in the right place. And now I'm going to say is, a lot of people have the tendency, well, I have an old shed there, round roof shed, whatever. I'm going to stick my parlour in there, and I'm going to save money. And the one thing I would say in that scenario is, by doing that, so by putting the parlour into that shed there, say, it's not an ideal shed. Usually you have to redo the floor, redo the wall, rewire it. So the only thing you're saving is probably a bad roof. And if that's in the wrong place or doesn't hit all the criteria I've hit before, what have you saved? And what I see in some places is they're going into old sheds, not saving a whole pile, not ending up with a good design, and then they have nowhere to calve for their calves or calve their cows. So you have to, like, a lot of them old sheds are perfect for rearing calves and perfect for calving cows, because that's what they're made for, that. And maybe you're better off for the sake of a few sheets over a roof, because what I would see them old sheds, the walls are never the right height or have to be added to carry the feeders. The floor has to be done and has to be rewired. And it tends not to be, very rarely you get that 50-foot wide shed that you can land in the parlour and the drafting. It tends to be a lot of them older sheds are 30-foot wide or neither here nor there. And it can be very hard to accommodate in. Now, sometimes it does work, and where it works, it's 100%. But just look at your own yard, and if you're thinking of using an old shed, would that shed be better left as it is for calves and for calving, or is it better and put my parlour in the right place? So when we looked at this farm here, that's what we did. We said, well, look, it's a great calf unit here, and there's a few cubicles there. the blue is here is the parlor, so we put the parlor in here, so the milk lorry comes in the front, he turns, he's gone out of the way. The right is the draft, so it's similar to the idea, and the red is the holding yard. So we're going to veer the cows in around the back, so the cows are going to come in here into the holding yard, get drafted and milked. The cubicles are going here with the cows feeding on the outside, silage pit is here. And if you go back to the original 3 movements, so we have 1 here, which is the cows, 2 here, which is the tractors, and 3 here, which is the milk lorry. And what I would normally say is where you draw the circles of the 3 of them, so there's the tractor movements there. The cow, I have to move Stuart out of the way here. The cow movements are there, and then you have it's where the 3 of them sort of combine and hit is where you put the parlor. And that's what you'll notice there is they very rarely, they won't cross over each other because the cows are going to come in from the back. So you could be making silage or feeding silage or whatever else. Someone else could be going to get the cows and milk, and everyone works independent. Because we're doing that, then we're also minimising the amount of time cows cross yards, which is very important from a cross compliance point of view. And in this scenario, then this here is becoming his calving shed, and this was his calf shed. So he has a well set up, and he's using every shed he had. So he has old cubicles in this shed here, and they become his pre-calving area, and then he's a small bit here where he pulls them out into this shed here, which is now a dry bed shed, to calve them. Calves go across here, which is not too far away from to carry the milk. So there's a flow to the yard by reworking it, and he also has plenty of space to expand the business then. So if he wants to put on extra cubicles, he can put another shed here, or he can extend that shed this way. If he wants to extend the holding yard, there's plenty of space at the back to keep going it. And that's what I think your initial point, Stuart, was to say, was like, in that if he went in here, invested here, it was bunched, it was tight, it could only be what it was meant to be. Where out here, the whole thing is opened up, the parlor can be expanded, the holding yard can be expanded, and it's suitable for additional cubicles.
I suppose the thing there, Patrick, as well, is that people probably get obsessed, I suppose isn't the right word either, but the parlor is a key focus when people are going about this business proposal for the first time. But like you said there, like after cows come calves, and where are they going to be calved? And you could run yourself down a rabbit hole thinking, like you said, to try and retain that roof, and it's not that you're going to waste it, it's just going to be used for another purpose, like.
What I would see, Stuart, and actually a lot of the new entrant farms, I would argue that they actually have far better facilities for calves and calving, because whether it was a sheep farm or a suckler farmer, they have the laybacks, they have dry sheds, and them sheds they have the capacity. And actually, in a lot of these farms, when you don't go into the use them for a parlor, they actually have more scope than the need. Like, so as the herd grows, they actually have the calving facilities for the bigger herd nearly in place. And I find that's why a lot of new entrants don't mind the calving as much as the dairy, some existing dairy people, because they actually are very well set up for it.
Yeah.
And takes the labour out of it. And the other thing I'll make a point of this, and I'll try to, you'll hear me say the same thing now 4 or 5 times just to try and get through to you, but to get this to work, this 1, 2, 3, to get the milk lorry in, get the tractor moving to one side, and getting the cows in from one side, the parlor will always end up to one side of the yard. It has to, because if you have the parlor in the middle of the yard and the milk lorry is coming right down into the middle of it, the cows are coming to the middle of it, and then the silage is either both sides of you. And if you think about it, at any of the farms, the majority of the farms you go to, the parlor tends to develop to one side, and then the farmyard moves to the other side of it, and that's by default, it catches all these things, because then milk lorry comes to the front, the tractors come in a different way, and the cows come a different way. If you look at a farmyard, and I just want to make it simple, like, so what I'd like to do it is that you should know where the parlor is going on a farm within 5 minutes of standing in the yard. Because if you take this scenario, there's a road here, there's a house here, so I have 2 sides gone. I've only 2 sides left. So there's 4 sides to any farmyard. We have to go on a side. There's usually a house on one side and a road on the other side. So now we're down to 2 sides. Then what you want to do is try to create it into a system that, well, is it suitable for the cow roadway to get the cows in right, and it's expandable. And what you'll normally do then is come to one side rather than the back, because as you go around the back, then you tend to box in the farmyard. So it actually ends up quite being easy if you think of that, like, I want to go to one side, I want to minimise the amount of turns and the whole lot in it. So normally that's why we can do it fairly fast, as I go, well, sure, the house is there, the road is there, sure, then I don't even bother looking up here. I'm off down here by default when the minute I arrive into the yard. I shouldn't be giving away all the tricks, I suppose, sure, anyway. So if we look at this farm, this is a dry stock farm. That was in cows and wanted to go back out cows, so I'll change my ink color again. Yep. Now, so the parlor is here. The old parlor, okay, is here. And so from a cow flow point of view, what used to happen is the cows had to walk up here, come in here into the whole yard and turn in. You can see there's a lot of movement through the yard, a lot of crisscrossing. Then if I do it in a different color again, if I get this right, now we're getting very fancy altogether now, but sure, here we go. The milk lorry then used to have to come in this avenue, turn up here and reverse back down. So what you'd see there is within both, now the milk lorry and the cows are crossing over. This is a dirty yard here. You know, milk lorry is not too happy coming down to get clean into it. If you're running late with the cow and the milk lorry's gates, you know, he has to wait till all the cows are milked before he can suck. So he's not the happiest person with you. And one piece of advice I will give you, the most important person in your yard outside your wife is the milk lorry man. Keep them happy. If we change the color again, on it to green, this is the tractor milk lorry. So he feeds down through the sheds like that. And he has to come across here and feed down through the shed like that as well. So now you can see here, in this area here, because of the design of the parlor, all the three movements are on top of each other. And it's a very, very busy yard. And it's always dirty and always clean. And the original thing what happened was that was designed for 30 or 40 cows and it worked 100%. There was no hassle. But it wasn't, he can't expand it because he's getting very hard to do it. And it's the whole thing's on top of each other. And all we're trying to say is, like when that's an example of a parlor in the middle of the yard. You can see how it just chokes up the whole thing, and there's a lot of busy on it. And the solution, what we wanted to do in that scenario, if I go in color again, run out of colors, bad job. Anyway, go this way. Is because if he put the parlor, that's only a small two span slatted tank there. So we're going to run the parlor off that, and then the whole yard coming off that again out the back here. Okay, so now we get the milk lorry to the front. We can bring the cows around the back and into from his cubicle shed into it, and the grass is coming in here. And just by doing that one change, it frees up the whole yard. So this passageway here now is clean. So he's able to feed his cows, no problem. This goes back into a calving shed, doesn't really make a difference. It's still utilised because the shed space is there, but it sweetens up the whole thing. And if you look at it there, and again, it comes to find the road is here, the house is on this side, that he doesn't own the land to the other side there, but it's a very straight, clean fix on the system. Now, if he really didn't want to knock that, you just move the shed out further to the right-hand side because he does own the field there. So again, and we do the 1, 2, 3. So the milk lorry 1 there, so that's the milk lorry. Tractors are over here 2, and then the cows are down here 3. So the 1, 2, 3s are all matched. We're 100%. We're to one side of the yard. There's nothing behind the milking parlor, so we can extend the whole yard into the system. We haven't blocked off these sheds, so if he wants to put another cubicle shed, it can go down here, and it can be associated then back into the parlor there. The extra silage pits will go here. So you get that sort of expansion phase. The whole thing can be planned. And like if this farmer was to, if he's put the parlor up here, that's on a 70-acre block, so milk 70. But if you got more land and you wanted to milk 150, I know where the next cubicle shed should go. I know where the silage pits will go, and I know where the milking parlor will go, because the whole thing is pre-planned and moved forward into the system. Does that make sense, Stuart? Or any questions on that?
Yeah, I suppose the big thing, Patrick, is actually to plan, even as you said it, you've said it already, but it's just to get it into people's minds, I suppose, is that, okay, you might be setting out with the intention of milking 50, 60, 70 cows, but there are opportunities coming to established farmers, to new entrants all the time now. And like the opportunity may come to expand that business. Now, whether you choose to take that opportunity or not is a completely different story. But if you're backed into a corner, you're going to be very limited in what you can do. Like,
yeah, so I think that space costs nothing. So in that scenario, okay, you have to build a parlor, but if you're doing the parlor's a parlor anyway, like, and the whole yard, and it's done the right way. All we've done then is left this space here. That's costing nothing. That's if I get an opportunity, I have a space. That's where my cubicle shed will go. Jeez, if I have to do my silage pits, for sure, we'll just extend it in the same pattern. If I have to extend, all you're doing is leaving space. The space costs you nothing. But if you don't have it, it creates a big problem to fix that, because, yeah, as you said, you have to relocate, move the whole system, or do something on it. So what we're trying to do is leave space for things to happen. And it mightn't be you. It mightn't be you. It could be the person after you that's doing it. And that's the scenario here. If that person had listened to Teagasc all the years ago, they wouldn't have the problem there now. Like, you know, so it's about. I think we would have got caught a little bit, and in fairness to, it's not to knock there's 30 years of a quota era where you weren't allowed to expand the business, and there was no hope of it. It didn't matter what was going to happen, and you wouldn't. You know, if you were to go back in the 90s, like, sure, when were you going to get the chance if 70 acres came up beside you?
Yeah.
But we're in a different time now, and and the numbers are slightly bigger, so it's about just rethinking the whole thing and making sure we're setting ourselves up for the future.
That famous word, future proofing.
Yeah, on it, and it's basic. I'll do let me do the next one. And this is another example, and this is, I would say, this is a new entrant that started up. It's in his second year now, and again, it's an old yard on it. And it's very simple. So this is the main access point in. So the milk lorry is coming here. So the milk lorry turns here and goes. So that's number one. Cows are coming from grass here. That's number two. Bad two. And the main tractor driving is up here, 3. So again, it's to one side. You can see it, and you can see the hole in yard there. It's very similar to the drawing that we put up. So the slatted tank at the back, hole in yard on the right hand side, going up into I think it's either 16 or 20. I can't remember. 20 in a parlor, dairy to one side, good and bright at the front, cows drafted out to the left hand side and back down. You can just see the draft line there and back out. They can either then be diverted back into the sheds or sent back to grass. No hold up, no messing, everyone's 100%. In this scenario here, again, what we're looking at, I'll change color just for the crack. So this shed here is these are all dry sheds, so he's straw bedding at the moment. On it, so that shed is going to be kept for calving. He's not going to convert it. He's going to convert these to cubicles, and longer term, if he needs to put on, if the thing gets bigger, this silage will be moved. Another cubicle shed will be put here. Silage will be moved over here or out the back, and allow for further expansion. What he'll have is here is then his main good milking shed. So what he's planning on doing, instead of ramming in a heap of cubicles in here and having to build a calving shed, he's going to likely stock this because it can only be what it's meant to be. And longer term, he'll put up his new cubicle shed. So he'll probably stay straw bedding for a couple of years till he gets himself lined up, and then he'll look at that. But what he has is a plan that works. So now he has his milking cow shed right beside his hole yard. The cows will be emptied down into the hole yard, milked. They can either be sent back to grass or on it. The cows from calving are up here, so they can be easily slipped into the draft unit and brought back into the side of the parlor and milked after cows are milked. And then they can be drafted back into the holding or the calving shed if they're a bit tender on the feet or whatever. So it's just a nice simple flow, and that's all you're doing. And I think when you start looking at yards and you start just thinking, how does the whole thing move, and does it make sense, or am I tripping over myself? Am I moving stock across the yard for no need? And it's as simple as that. And that's all nearly any Teagasc person will end up doing, is trying to get that sort of flow to the system. And look, and I was saying that to Stuart before, and I was 2 hours arguing about putting the parlor here because I wanted to put into one of the sheds here, and I wanted to put up here, and I want to put over here, and there was one place for the parlor, and 2 hours later I got my way. So stubbornness is a great thing, Stuart. On it, but they're delighted with it, and it's working fierce well for them, and the cow flow is exceptional on the system. And if you want to see how that, if I get out of that, discard there, and I go into here, so that's fundamentally how the shed looks from so he has the holding yard into the parlor, the dairy to one side, and the cows drafting out on the left hand side. And if you look at that from above, again, very similar to the other one. A bar, there's more space at the front on his one. It's not it's drawn there, but similar idea. And what I'm saying is, when you have that type of plan in your mind, the whole thing, and how the cows move and flow through the system, the whole thing will work fairly easy for you, because best practice is best practice, and that's all we're trying to implement, is best practice within the system. So on to the next one, and this is again an example of it. What we're looking at is that this is down in Wexford. It's a new entrance, large-scale startup. And it's a greenfield site. And I suppose what you want to try and do with a greenfield site is you should definitely get it right. And I think for some people, you can see there was an old yard here. Sometimes the greenfield site is building the new parlour beside the existing parlour rather than in it. And that can just add a lot of potential to develop the farm going forward and increase the future-proofingness, that's hardly a word, but anyway, of the farm. So this is a rotary parlour in this example here. So the rotary is here. So you can see the milk lorry comes in here. So that's our number one. The cows then are moving from around here. That's our number 2. And then that's all around here, and the feeding and the whole lot is number 3. So again, it's the 1, 2, 3, parlor to one side, cows moving in and out and not going through the yard, but this is all associated. They have a link tank across there, so these cows are emptied down, up, milked. They can either go back to grass or back into the cubicle shed. Up at the top side here, they built the calving shed, so the calving shed furthest away from the parlor, or the calving there, and the calves are moved across. And that all goes to a large lagoon in this scenario. The silage pit is here, it's just in construction, that picture. The silage pit's there. But if you were to ask me, there's about 500 cubicles there. If you were to ask me if they get more land, where's to go? The silage pit design here is the exact same footprint as the cubicles. So the cubicles move on to the silage pit and the silage pit moves out and the whole system keeps work. We're not reinventing the wheel. We have the right system where the flow works. So we just keep replicating expansion. And I suppose that's what we're trying to show here. When we're looking at expansion is what I call expansion lines. So if you take the cubicles expansion or the housing, that's the way they're going to expand. They're going to keep replicating each other going that way. The expansion line, the dairy, the whole yard. See the way we didn't put the lagoon directly behind the whole yard? So that's mean if the whole yard needs to expand, it goes that way. So they're the expansion line. So I know if that herd grows, which way the system will move and which way it'll grow out. And someone explained to me best before, and you have an example of it up here, is that's the typical of an old yard, and that's the forecourt. So you build around, square in the whole thing. And the problem with that is once you fill the square, where does the next shed go? So the next shed has to go out here, and now the flow is gone because your silage, you're tripping across. There's no right movement to it. And if you look at it, then what you should be doing is developing in straight lines and examine it. So that's we call that the parlor, and then you say that's your housing here, and which way, and if they're developing in straight lines like that, so the housing is going to go that way in line with the cubicles, and I show an example of it, or maybe the housing is going that way, it doesn't matter. But all you have to do is leave space for it, and you're not boxing yourself in at any time. So if they'd put them cubicles there in here, that was it. They then have a problem to say, well, we have to house our cows. So if the cubicle shed was down here, to house additional cows have to go up onto the cubicles. So if the cows go up onto the cubicles, what's going to bring them cows into the parlor?
Stick.
A man with a stick. And what I would normally say is it's different in some places where you have a lovely parlor, sweet parlor, and does this and does that for you. And the most important piece of gear you have in the farm is a stick. So you have to think about the scenario and then on that. So it's just about future thinking it and leaving the space. All we did there was left space. It cost us nothing extra. So this is another example. And again, as I said to you already, all I'm doing is repeating myself multiple times. So the parlor in this scenario is here. Okay. The whole yard is not big enough. The whole yard can be expanded if they wanted it. So not too bad, nothing behind it. Milk lorry is coming down in here, down through the yard, has to turn there and go out. The cows in the winter are over here, and you can see the cows in the winter then are crossing across by the silage. So now we have a bit of a dirty area here, very hard to expand. The cow, you're driving across and into it and whatever else. Where if they were to look at that and put a new parlor, if they sited a new parlor in this line here, it'd be directly associated with their cubicle, so the cows would be able to walk straight out. The milk lorry would be able to come in and turn and go again, and it's sweeten up and tidy up the whole yard. And again, what happened there is it was fitted into that's where the parlor always was. So the parlor went back to where the parlor always was. Milk lorry always came in here, so milk lorry can keep coming in there. But the milk lorries are only getting bigger. That's actually coming down through the back door of the house, and this way it takes out the whole the milk lorry out of the yard altogether, which means it's simple things can cause. If you've seen there's a tractor parked there. If the tractor's parked there and the milk lorry comes in, there's a problem because some of them are lads are not able to drive a tractor, believe it or not, and they won't move it. So next there's phone calls and this, that, and the other. It's about keeping that clean access in and out. There's always a way of simplifying the yard and moving it up and getting it right and allowing for that expansion and expansion lines, and that's what we're talking about there on it. What was I listening? Oh yeah, this one. Let's think about this one now myself. Where is this? Yeah. So In this one here, it's the parlor is here. Okay. And I'll change my color. And the point, there's another reason why I'm pointing out this. So sometimes as new entrants, we get advice from existing farmers, which is great, no problem, like your friends. Just make sure, just like every cow in the country gets milked. They will get milked. That doesn't mean there was a whole heap of hardship within it to get it. So in this scenario here, the cows come up through here, turn across the yard into the parlor and are milked. So again, we have turns and twists in yard. You can see then he's feeding. So if I change the color again, we'll go, the last time, I'll go yellow. So that's his route for his feeding. And we changed last time again, just for the green again, and that's the milk lorry in there as well. So now we have an awful pressure point here, and the whole yard is tied up when the cows are milking. The whole system is under pressure. The parlor, that's the parents' house there. The whole yard's here, can't be expanded because it's back into the garden. So to expand the extra cows, the cows have to sit on the yard here, which blocks up the yard further. They're now not directly behind the parlor, so now the cows, if you can imagine, the cows will come in, turn up here, turn up into the corner. What's going to get them to turn back around and go into the whole yard? Back to our stick again. There's no room for drafting because it blocks up the main entrance into it. So if this is a dry shed here, if they had converted that shed there and put the parlor, if I change my color last time, or nearly that, so if the parlor had been put in this line here, milk lorry would have been able to come to the front, cows would have been able to come straight in, we'd have room for drafting, and these cows here in the winter would only have to cut across there. So it sweeten up the whole show. So it's just about rethinking it now. And look, in that farm, they were only after doing up the parlor when I got there. So the first job I had to do was tell them they're after going from a 6 to a 12, or I don't remember, something double up. And the first thing I said after I said hello was, by the way, you put the parlor in the wrong place. I got no.
Sat into the car and drove off.
No, I got no tea there, Stuart. I should have got the tea first before I gave the bad news. It's a devil to say, but like, just again, it comes back to them things. And every farm is different. Every scenario comes up from a different point. But what I would say is we have to start with a set of rules, and from them rules, then we build get best practice. So the 1, 2, 3 milk lorry, tractors, cows, are they separated? And in some scenarios you can't. It just can't be done. And I would say the least, always try to keep the cows separate. And maybe if you have to cross the tractors over in the milk lorry, you get over that. But crossing the cows over either of them creates a lot of dirt and creates a lot of hassle on tractor wheels. Then you're looking at,
Patrick, yeah, sorry, go on.
Just expansion lines. Make sure this thing can grow. Sorry, Stuart.
Yeah, no, it's just a point from when I was in New Zealand 10 years ago. Like you actually would be reported if the lorry is crossing over the cow track.
Yeah.
Going into the yard, and like ultimately that's probably something that's going to come to us potentially.
Yep.
So if especially with new entrants, where, as you said, where people have the opportunity both in terms of stock and facilities to set the farm up for once and for all, basically, like, because there's a lot of people who would love to do things differently and can't, maybe, or can't justify doing it for a while, but you're in a very unique position as a new entrant to take advantage of the position that you're in to get it right from the get-go. Like,
yep. And sit back and look at it, with a cold eye. And I think I'd always say the worst farm you'll ever design is your own, because you second guess yourself, and that shed was always there, and this, that, and the other, and that's the way it always is. And it's far easier for me. I don't care really. I don't mind knocking through things to get the thing right, because it's not my yard. I know it works. Where on my own farm, I'd find, geez, I second guess myself the worst, and I nearly always get my father or someone to make sure I'm on the right road, because you give in to yourself. And I'd see it with discussion groups. You'd go in and they'd give out stink to the host farmer about thinking of putting a shed there, and then they go home and do the exact opposite. Like, so just get someone with a fresh set of eyes, but make sure the person with the fresh set of eyes has them sort of theories. It's not just coming in, I'll put a parlor there. Does it work? Does the flow work? Can be expanded on? Are the cows easy and out? Have we room for a draft? And all the things we pointed out. And if it doesn't catch most of them requirements, then it's probably not the right place for them, because you're giving in on too many things, like, and there's no hope after that. Last example, look, this is again a rotary parlour in this scenario, but just similar to the rose garden thing. But you can see the cows are floated in from the back, milk lorry comes to the front, the feedings to one side on it. Very simple, clean. And what I would say is we have plenty of examples, and scale is irrelevant. The same principles work for 10 cows as 100 cows. It's just that you're moving more the thing is bigger on it. So if you go to a lad that has, even you go back to the rose garden one, there's 500 or cows or whatever it is on it, it doesn't make a difference. It's the same principles apply to get the thing right. And that's why we're trying to scale is relevant. Go see some of these newer places and get ideas, because that's where you're going to see the best solutions. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so just on the capital budget then, moving along. So this is the grazing milk platform. Just again, we went through that last week, but no harm throw it up again. It's the key: start your capital budget with your milking platform or your grazing budget. This is outside the stock. This is the next most important place you'll put your money, and you can see there works in around €800 cow to take average land to up to performance. So that's taking land that needs reseeding, needs roadways, water, and needs a bit of soil fertility. It'll work in around €800 cow. So on a 100 cow farm, work in about 80,000. Don't forget the outside blocks. So within the outside blocks, we need good quality silage. A lot of times it's forgot about. We need good quality silage. Probably won't be as expensive, but there will be a requirement there for reseeding and soil fertility. Into the housing. Now, we didn't really overly get into housing or cubicles on it, because I think for most of you, it's to get the parlour right and worry about it afterwards. Look, if any of you want us to go through it on a later stage, Stuart and I, you can come back to Stuart and I and we put it on, there's no problem. But as a rough rule of thumb, so the cubicles themselves, that's including the roof, excluding the slurry storage, about €1,100 cow space. Another about 530 or that for the slurry to go underneath them. A silage pit works out about 250 a cow, calving pens and calf housing. So that's about €2,000 cow. Again, most of you will have some of these in place. You may have a silage pit, probably have calf sheds suitable, or can be med suitable, and calving houses. You may have the started tank, and you may only have to throw a few cubicles into a layback. So the range in what it costs to spend on the housing is massive. And where most new entrants get away well is they have some level of housing on the farm already, and they are able to utilize that to keep this cost down. And then we look at the milking parlour, and this is done on basically 7 rows. So again, new milking parlour, the plant, 4,000, so that will include cluster removers. That works about €570 cow. The parlour is the top line is the concrete work. The bottom line then is the plant, but that would include cluster removers. Then we add in our feeders and the bulk tank, and it comes up to about €1,400 cow. That's ex-VAT, but before grant. Again, some of you will get the grant back off that. The one thing to highlight there is that figure there. On the plant, that can go to 10,000 a unit. So you can blow your whole budget on this. And that can also be done for less on the system. So it'll some people are able to get in less, but that's roughly as a rule of thumb where the whole thing comes together on a budget. And the last thing then, right, and what we're trying to do in all these things, in every step we made, is fundamentally, I'm not going to go through it here now, is this what we get back to? And we saw a sample of it with Peter Hams. It comes back to the business plan. And this is just a cash flow for a business plan filled out on it. And this is what you'll require for the bank. And the key line down here is this net cash. Net cash is there money left over? So if you end up borrowing, I'll just show for example there. So there's a borrowing the 600,000. So if you watch that 29,000 there, so say in this scenario here, they want to do something very, very snazzy. Keep going and borrow. I know ignore the example for the moment now. So this is not I want. This is what'll pay. So borrowing more and more money has to be paid back. It doesn't necessarily. We have to make sure whatever you do has to fit back into business plan. This is when some people, and I said at the very start, the business plan is not for the banks. The business plan is for you. That what decision you make, to go into cows. It's going to make you more money. Yes, there'll be a few tight years, but that there's something they're going to be there that's going to be worth the effort. If it's not, if it's just a thing, I want a big shed and I'm going to have no money, well, I don't think you should be talking to Stuart or I. Never, fair enough, Stuart. So look, I think from all of you there, what I was just say, even you put all the stuff that we've done over the last thing together, it'll all be brought together in the business plan, and the business plan then say you're on the right road. If you're overspending, you have to go back and see, can you taper it back, get it right, and get the thing going. Okay, so I'll stop sharing there, Stuart, and hand it back to you.
Very good. So, Patrick, yeah, sure, I suppose to summarize it really, there's kind of rules and principles there that Patrick has outlined, especially last week and this week in relation to the infrastructure. So I think the number 3 is probably, it's a bit like Sesame Street here now. The number 3 is the number of the series. So you want to be trying to minimize the number of movements in terms of grazing infrastructure to a maximum of 3 ideally. And as we said, if something comes on stream ultimately afterwards, and it means that the number of movements increase, it's okay. But obviously, by limiting it to the 3 in the first place, you're going to minimize the number of movements that will have to occur subsequently. The other thing then is in relation to the yard. So I suppose think of like it's like a Venn diagram that we used to see when we were in secondary school, only that the circles don't overlap in terms of the layout of the yard. So you have your feeding area, your milk lorry area, and your cow area, and you want them touching off one another, but you don't want them intersecting with one another, ideally, if you can help it. And then finally, I suppose, going back to the very first piece with Peter, and we also had Ashley and Evan on the week after in relation to the stock. And again, I just come back to emphasize the point: if you're a new entrant, you're starting out into dairy cows in the next 12 months or 24 months or 36 months, whatever your plan is. And I suppose Patrick and I would be of the opinion that the sooner the better is really the scenario to try and get going. But the most important thing that you can do is prioritize to spend money on the stock that you're going to bring in. Let it be 100, 200 euros extra per head that you pay. You will buy plenty of stock in the country right now, but you will not buy plenty of good stock in the country right now. So to emphasize that point, I just cannot overemphasize that point. You can buy herds of cows. You will supply milk to Dairygold, Glanbia, Lakelands, Aruvo, whoever Kerry you want to. But the difference between what milk you'll supply from good stock and from ordinary stock is fundamentally what will uphold your business plan in the long term, really. So we have guys in discussion groups now that have good herds put together over a long number of years. They would still love to be in the position that some of you are in terms of the genetics that they could potentially have on their farm, because obviously they're still building their herds, but they have 4 and 5 cent a litre buffers over base prices. So you often see on Agriland and in the journal in relation to base price and so forth, the high quality milk solids produced by a good quality herd of cows is going to make sure that you have a good buffer over that base price if we hit a dip. And Brexit is obviously something that could influence that. So make sure that you invest in the right things. So concrete and steel is lovely, but ultimately you need to make your focus is obviously getting high quality milk into the supplier that you're dealing with and getting a return for that. And then you can add on a bit more concrete and a bit more steel after that once you're making the money. I suppose that's pretty much it, Patrick, unless you want to add anything else. I suppose the presentations and the recordings are available on the Teagasc website. If you just Google Let's Talk Dairy, it'll bring you straight to it. And today's will be put up there in the next couple of hours, maybe sometime tomorrow. And then everything will be there for you to look back at.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jordan. Look, anyone that logged on, I hope it was helpful. And sure, if you're in doubt, just contact your local Teagasc and we'll do our best to help you out. And look, I think there's a great future there for a lot of people. And I think we're very lucky on this series of webinars with the farmers that we're able to bring in. All started from different places, but I think it's great where we are now. We have plenty of people who have just done it first and showed us the way, and I think they were them all now, the Tobins, Ashley and Evan, and Peter, and then Pádraig was going on the journey as well. they're leading the way and shining example. So I think it's lean on them and their experiences, and you'll be on the right road.
I suppose the final thing is, like you said, Patrick, everybody will give you advice, but not everybody's going to give you good advice. So be careful of who you listen to. And I refer to a client that I used to have back in Limerick when I was down there. He used to say that you had to listen to what everybody had to say, and you tried to take the best bits out of everything and put it all together to suit yourself best. So
Yeah.
I think that's quite an important thing, to just be careful of who you take advice from. And I think that's particularly important in relation to the stock and the facilities, because you can spend a lot of money in the wrong places very quickly. So
Yep.
we'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patrick, and thanks to Padraig for doing the recording in the background. I'll be back again Thursday with the Let's Talk Dairy webinar, and we'll see you then. In the meantime, take care.